In 1978, Holden, then Australia's biggest selling car brand, launched a new model, the Holden Commodore. The Commodore replaced the Kingswood, but its smaller body ended up being a little bit of a mistake, and within 4 years, Holden had lost that sales domination in Australia. This car, a decade later, was the fix. It's the 1988 Holden VN Commodore. The VN Commodore was a design unique to Holden in Australia. Holden was actually really clever with this car. It had the whole of the General Motors world empire to get parts from and inspiration from. This flush glass, that's thanks to Opel in Germany. The engine, originally a 3.8 litre V6, that's courtesy of Buick in America. And the rest of the car was good Aussie tough bush engineering from the first Commodores. This was a big car, longer wheelbase, it was wider than the old Commodore, big back seat, big boot. And those factors of big meant that for the first time in a decade, the Holden Commodore was once again a match for the big Ford Falcon. So back in 1988, when the big new VN Commodore was launched, it was a big deal. In fact, it was so big that Holden chose to use that word, big, as the basis of its marketing campaign. So all the newspaper ads, all the magazine ads simply referenced the big new Holden. So it was pretty big. 'Even more than 30 years after these cars were launched, they remain, to me, a really good drive. You don't feel like you're driving a dinosaur like you do with the 60s and 70s Aussie stuff. They handle pretty well, they're reasonably quiet. Once you get on top of the mechanical issues, they are quite reliable. Four-wheel disc brakes, a big cabin makes them, a sensible and, quite fun family classic. I reckon they're great. "30 years later, most of the VN's early quality problems don't matter anymore. All the bombs are gone, they're in wrecking yards, which means the ones that are remaining are the ones that people are buying, especially if it's a V8. When Holden launched the VN Commodore in 1988, there was only one engine available, a 3.8 litre V6. However, the next year, 1989, Holden reintroduced a V8 engine option for the Commodore. It was loosely based on the 1969 Holden V8, but for the 1990s, Holden added new cylinder heads and electronic fuel injection, which gave the engine much better fuel economy and more power. Holden's new fuel-injected 5 litre V8 kick-started a whole new era in Australian performance cars. As well as being available across the Commodore range, this new engine was the heart and soul of the new Commodore SS. It was also the foundation for what Holden's new Special Vehicles division did, Holden Special Vehicles HSV. It had its own versions of this engine with a little bit more horsepower. And of course, this engine slapped the face of Ford Australia into reintroducing a Falcon V8. But they're all stories for another time. I'm Glenn Torrens, this has been Addicted to Cars. I'll see you next time. This guy. Especially if it's a V8.